Hi guys, and welcome to another repaint video. To make a long story short, this super lovely person asked me if I could reserve one of my dolls on Etsy, and it got sold before they could buy it. So I asked if I could make a custom instead, and they mentioned Buggy from One Piece. I got to make this doll and I'm super happy about that. He is such a fun character. Let me just get my hat and we can start this. I made this myself, be nice. I used the headless mistress, which is fitting since Buggy can detach his body parts, a pretty awesome thing if you ask me. I've always wanted to write on the board while talking from the back of the classroom, but alas, I have to write while talking to the wall. I'm removing a piece of the scalp to glue a magnet inside. My first thought when I took on this project was that I wanted to be able to change his expression. So I glued a tiny magnet on the inside of the mouth, holding it in place with another one while the glue dried, and then I removed the paint with acetone before I did some plastic surgery on the face. Since I'll sculpt the mouth, I removed the lips using my X-Acto knife and this cool new Dremel part. It sands a flat surface, but I returned with some light sanding afterwards to make it more even, and there we go. Looks terrifying. Before sculpting the mouthpieces, I primed the face with paper glue, and then I used this cool new thing, Milliput. When someone tells me about some craft supplies I've never used before, I really can't help myself. I have to try it, and this might be my new favorite sculpting clay. As usual, I mix it on a 1:1 ratio. Knowing when to stop mixing is hard since both parts are the same color, so I must go on, feeling. Then I cut a piece of metal from an old wine cap. I got these from my dad. He really supports my craft, and look, it's magnetic. Next, I smush some Milliput on the metal piece, ensuring it doesn't move, and then I just sculpt away. I also made a nose, no clown without a clown nose. After 24 hours, I pulled it all off and removed the glue. And there we go! I made another mouthpiece for his angry face. The nose got some red and gloss, nothing fancy, and then I moved on to painting the mouth. This is a bit backwards. I did work on the mouth, sanding the edges and so forth. I modified the mouthpieces slightly in the end because I realized the proportions weren't completely right, but you get the idea. Sanding, painting, and glossing. It's time to attach the scalp and work on the face. So yeah, the dudes in One Piece don't have irises, which is fine, but I couldn't stick 100% to that design, so I gave him blue eyes. I tried giving him an angry expression, because even when he's happy, he's drawing down his eyebrows. Oh, and I focused more on the lashes, because that's how it looks in the anime. Then the markings and working on building colors. The expression is on point, yes. But in the end I felt something was wrong, so I called in my best art critic, my son. And he actually said the same thing that I was thinking. Something was wrong with the face, and indeed it was a little bit too realistic. So I added some white and blue acrylic to make it more cartoonish. I did that at the end though, so he looks more like a cosplayer at the moment, which is fine. Cosplayers are awesome. I glossed the eyes with Tamiya gloss varnish, attached the nose, and finished the face up for now. Next, I made hair out of acrylic yarn like I always do. Cut, tie, brush, flatten, and glue. This is self-care from me. It's very therapeutical. I cut the excess before preparing the head because I decided to give him a ponytail, so I cut a hole to add it later. Then I glued around it until I reached the end. Gotta trust the process. I glued a nice hairline using more yarn hair to hide the wefts, and then I let it dry completely before brushing it all out. I tied some yarn, brushed and flattened it, and then I pushed it through the hole. It might seem excessive, but I wanted the ponytail to be as long as possible. Finally I tied it, and the head was finished. Looking cute! So Buggy wears gloves, and making 1.5 centimeters finger gloves, I'm not saying it's impossible, but So I painted the hands white and glossed them with Tamiya gloss varnish, and it looks fabulous. Next I blushed the body. Although it won't show, now we both know the body looks more realistic than a plastic toy, which is nice. Next I glued some white fabric to tidy up the edges, and then I moved on to making shoes. I covered the tiny feet in cling foil and glued pieces of tissue paper together to make a base. I added a little extra on the toes to make them more shoe-shaped. After letting it dry, I added masking tape to them and marked out the shape to make a little pattern, and then I cut the back and took them off. I peel off the tape and cut the pieces, and then I transfer them onto brown fall leather fabric, making these little pieces. Then I cut some corners and glued the hems before sewing them. I glued fabric on the toes before gluing the side pieces. I don't know what to call them, but you know what I mean, those panel things. I fix the bottom, gluing the sides, and then I make the soles out of epoxy clay. I mix equal parts by weight and create the base. It takes 2 rounds of sculpting, which is longer than doing it in one sitting, but it's easier and the risk of messing up is lower. So here I'm sculpting the heel using a toothpick as a base, and then after another 24 hours I sand the surface before adding gutta to the edges, because, you know, it makes it a bit smoother. I use the Armor Painter acrylics, which I love, and paint the soles. Then I gloss them with Tamiya gloss varnish. Then I actually rewatched Stranger Things and fixed some gold details. The eyelets are made out of 3D glue. It was a bit of an experiment. So far so good, it needs some details, but we'll get to that. Now let's make the coat. I made a pattern from the Headless Mistress coat a while ago and the fitting is so good. First I sewed the back seam, giving it a little decorative stitching, and then I added the sleeves thinking this green ribbon would be an okay base for the decorations. Then I sewed the sides and started experimenting with the gold embellishments, and the foam clay was too brittle, 3D fabric glue just went blorp. And finally I glued some black string onto green fabric and it worked! It was bendable and had the right proportions. I sewed the fabric into tubes and painted the string gold. It's looking good, a bit messy, but good. Next I will attach them to the sleeves by gluing and sewing them. It was a bit of a challenge, but I'm stubborn and you can come a long way by just being stubborn. Then I glued fur fabric to the hem and, well, I was so happy with the result. I enjoyed every part of this project. Having a character design to lean on, I could focus on the process instead, and I was learning a lot. Here I'm brushing the fabric to make it fluffy. The green shoulder pads are next, and I started by making the fringe. First I glue the ends of pieces of a cord and then I tape them, cut them even and glue them together. While they dry, I make the green things. I didn't study my reference pictures at this point. I was so sure about how they looked that I made them wrong and I had to redo them. But I basically cut out cardboard pieces, glued them together and painted them green, and then I glossed them with Liquitex gloss varnish, let that dry and glued the fringe underneath. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. I'm so happy with them and they just needed some shaping. Then I hot glued them to the shoulders. And here we go, the coat is finished. I continued on the orange path and made the hat. Getting the pattern right was tricky and I can't explain how I did it. I made this sort of base and kind of the sides, checked it once or twice and made a first crappy attempt. At one point I was lying on the floor staring at the ceiling trying to figure it out, and this is what I ended up with. So here we are, adding a lining to make it more stable, and then I cut it out and glued the edges to make it stick better together, and then I made this awkward hat base thing out of the same fabric. I glued the frame to the base because I could not for my life figure out how to sew them together and make them work, and then I added some 3D glue to the brim. We'll get back to that. Next I trimmed the edges and added a red and white striped fabric, and I bought many fabrics for this project, but most prints didn't have the right proportions, and this one for the trim though, mwah. I glued it into a ribbon and attached it with more glue to the hat, and things started to look good. I added some of the hair wefts. I think there's hair hanging on the sides, it's the same color at least. And then I painted the 3D glue and thought it looked tacky, so let's fix that. I painted a piece of cotton string with titanium white, let that dry, and then I glued it to the hem, and it was one of my better choices. Then I could paint, and I was so scared I would mess up, but I didn't, and I guess I have nothing smart to say about this, so that's more than enough quiet time. Lastly, I flattened and trimmed the hair, and then it was done. Yay, looks awesome. I made some leg warmers out of the same striped fabric, and he probably has socks, but the material is not stretchy enough, so leg warmers it is. He kinda looks silly now, with only a coat and a hat, so let's make pants. I wanted to make a pair of harem pants, so I took this pattern and flared it out, attached it to another piece of paper. It's a neat way to add volume. Then I cut it out and I, well, used it. I sewed the front and back of the crotch, adding a little decorative seam and a waistband, and gluing it instead of pinning it before sewing is so much easier. Next I gathered the legs and sewed another hem like the waistband. Finally I sewed the legs and glued the edges to prevent them from fraying, then I could turn them right side out and admire the tiny pants. I need a pair in black, and human size, preferably. I had this fabric in the perfect color, so I made the sash. The edges needed some gluing because burning them was not an option. Trust me, I've had one too many oopsie daisies to try it again. This works fine though. So here I'm sewing it to the pants, adding some Velcro. Then I added the boots, gave them lacing out of bare thread. I inherited this from my grandmother and it is serving me well. God, I miss her. I added a dollop of super glue to the bow so they're permanently attached unless one cuts the string. Oh, and then they got these fancy decorations. I think I made them out of milliput. I really enjoyed focusing on the process rather than the design. When I made this doll, I was renovating my bathroom. It's a long story, but all my artistic creativity just went into that. Finding the right chandelier, choosing colors and stuff like that. So this was nice. And the shoes are done. Next, I gave up on finding a fabric that worked, so I made my own. First, I added all the tape, then moved them upwards until every second row was covered, and then I airbrushed it with red, let it dry, and finally used varnish to prevent it from smudging. Removing these was so satisfying. I trimmed the edges and voila! Red striped fabric! I think this is a pattern from Delightful. I wanted a loose fit t-shirt and this pattern did not disappoint. I cut it out, fixed the backside, sewed the shoulders and added the sleeves. Looks amazing and it has the right amount of stripes. I sewed the sides and turned the right side out, finishing the t-shirt. Final fit and I'm going with him. I got the scarf and attached it to the shirt to make it look better. Finally, I actually fixed the face, just as I mentioned before. I painted some white to make it more cartoony and I think I nailed it. Looks much better. No Buggy without his cannonballs, so I made some out of foam clay. I just rolled them, let them dry. I should have allowed them to dry for at least a week because in the end I had to varnish them again since they shrunk a teeny tiny bit, which messed up the gloss. But all is well that ends well and I had such a jolly good time painting these. After painting them, I had to fix some lines, then I glossed them with this super handy varnish spray. It's supposed to be satin matte, but it's glossy, I don't know why. It looks great though. Finally, let's make a stand. For obvious reasons, I wanted the stand to have a nautical theme, so I mixed some resin and sand and made that the base. This felt like baking cookies. It looked boring flat, so I made some ridges to imitate how the waves form the seabed. If it makes sense, then I added some rocks and gold flakes. I printed a wanted poster on coffee stain paper, cut it out, stained it some more and sealed it with glue so the resin wouldn't ruin it, and then I bent it a bit and glued it to the bottom. Then I mixed the rest of the resin, dyed it blue. I'm so proud of this stand, it's ridiculous, it's so cool. I dyed the leftover resin white and added it to the edge. I wanted it to look like sea foam and then I blew on it with a straw and went back and forth like that. After 24 hours of curing, I can demold and attach the wire to hold him up and this looks perfect. I drill a hole, drill a groove on the other side, run the wire through, bend it and glue it in place. I wasn't happy about the fit, so I added some pieces of toothpick and then I bent it, fitting it around the leg, and look at him! He can stand on his own. They grow up so fast. And that was that. I'm so happy I made this commission. It was a perfect project with the right timing, and although I love planning the bathroom, it just sucked all the creativity out of me. I'm so happy it's finished and I can return to my smaller projects. And yes, I did find the perfect lamp, and I painted a little chest of drawers, and I choose pink walls, and it's glorious and very me. Anyway, enough about my... Buggy was fun, but I'm not making more One Piece characters. I'm still determining what the next video will be. I have finished projects, but I need to figure out what to share first. It will, I guess, be a surprise. So anyway, this is what I started with, and this is the result, and I am proud of myself. I'm thankful for you watching this video, even though it's longer than usual, and you're awesome. I can't point out a favorite part about this doll, because, I don't know, I think I love it all, and that's okay. I hope you're having a good day or evening, depending on when you're watching this. Until next time, bye!